Welcome, everyone. We are going to be talking today about data comparisons with DataGraph, and uh, I have been personally having a lot of fun with this challenge that's on Twitter right now. That's called the hashtag 30-day chart challenge, if you want to go on there and check it out. And I'm going to show you some of the things that I've been creating and posting. And good morning. And also just some of the techniques that I've been using, because you may not necessarily be interested in specifically participating in this challenge, although it would be great to have other people representing with DataGraph. But the techniques that I'm using, that I'm going to show you today, some of the things that I've been doing, certainly will give you, I think, some great tools to use in the visualizations that you create with DataGraph. So let me start actually with sharing my screen. So here is this is actually my page on Twitter, where I posted a number of things. And just to see what I'm talking about in terms of this particular challenge, again, this is just friendly. It's not really a competition, but just a way to inspire people to work on their data visualization skills. And the way they have it set up for the month of April is that there are these 5 different categories, and this is what we're drawing upon for some of the webinars, or the webinars that we're doing this month. And I can show you a couple of the things that I have done. This is the first sort of set of graphics. This is one that I did for the comparisons. So basically we have these general categories, and then within each of those, every day has a specific prompt. The prompt for this day was part to whole. And what I chose to do a visualization on is looking at the total number of people that are Icelanders, have Icelandic heritage, that are all over the world, and showing what countries those come from. I think I can zoom in on this a little bit more so you can see this. It's actually sort of interesting because there's a lot of people that are in Canada and in the US, and it has a lot to do with those populations are due to the fact that in the late 1800s, there was a food shortage in Iceland. The weather had turned bad, and some areas that were productive for growing food had become very unproductive. As a result, there are a lot of people that emigrated out of Iceland into Canada and the US. So anyway, so this is how I ended up visualizing this. And one of the things that I want to talk about is, how did I come up with this visualization? Everything that you see within this graphic is something that is done. It's done at final form using DataGraph. So there's a lot of different elements here. The particular type of graph that you see is referred to as a waterfall graph, where we have these stacked bars that are offset with each category. And I've labeled them according to the percentages that you see here. And this is a good example of something where we don't have a waterfall command within DataGraph, but because the commands we do have are so flexible, you can create this graph. So I'm going to show you how to do that, and show you a little bit of the process of how I came about with this one. And then here's some other ones that I did. I looked at the temperatures on April 3rd. It was freezing on this day. So I was actually had gone to the coast to enjoy some nice weather, but it was really cold, and found out, based on pulling some data, that about 12% of the time it does historically freeze on April 3rd. Here's another one looking at the topic here was magical. So I pulled data on the number of US Quidditch teams per state. And I really like this one. Each of these bars is showing you the is scaled based on the number of teams. And then you have this total bar on the bottom, which is the scaled based on the total. So I scaled the width to represent the total number of teams. And these stacked bars are, again, all done within DataGraph, or actually just the sorted bars for you Harry Potter fans out there. And then quickly, I did another one here, kind of looking at how we compare data. There were a number of graphs I saw that were comparing between 2 points a long time. And I wanted to kind of question a little whether that was always a good practice to do. Here's another one I did on comparing whether the amount of filling in an Oreo double stuff is truly double. This is actually some experimental data that we did collect. Not specifically for this, but it was something from what one of my kids had done. And so did a graph on that. And I think that's, maybe there's, one more in this category that I wanted to talk about. And this one I particularly like. This is, I'm a big Ms. Pac-Man fan, and showing my age maybe a little bit here, but the Ms. Pac-Man has a number of different fruits that move around, and you get a score for each one that you eat. So this pictogram, where the amount of each fruit that you see, that number is scaled to the score for eating that fruit. So anyway, so these are the kind of skills that I'm going to talk about today. So the first thing that I actually wanted to do was to show you some skills actually in terms of how I'm doing this. And the first thing on my list is actually related to how am I getting these images into DataGraph and creating the images that I'm using. So I wanted to actually show you this. Actually, this is just one more example. This is something that we did on the DataGraph page. And this is kind of a cute one, but this is looking at fruit production data. And you can see that I have these apples and oranges here. If you go on the DataGraph Twitter page, this is played on, it will loop. So it shows you the apples and oranges coming back out again. And you can see how the orange production actually has gone down quite a bit in the past number of years. And I did read about this a little bit, that there's a number of reasons why: loss of the groves themselves being converted in well, I guess not, Florida's not the only place where we have oranges, but the alpha channel is something that basically adds a transparency to an image. So any image that you have has the potential to have some kind of a background associated with it. The background is something that you can get rid of so that you see a transparency behind it. So for example, on this file, so here is the actual file where I have this apples versus oranges visualization that's done here. So each of these, this apple and this orange image, are both images that I downloaded from online. And then I removed the background so that they would have a transparency associated with them. As a result, let me actually just I'll take this image, let me add a new graph. Each of these images, when I paste them in, they get pasted as a graphic command. So if I put them in a graph and then I can move them around, you'll see how actually even the axis right now is on top of where I'm moving this image around. So so what the alpha channel is doing is it's making the fact that the orange itself, everywhere around that orange, is transparent. One thing you can do, a handy trick, is the background. Actually, I think it is under here. Yeah, the axis line itself has a setting within the style settings to go above things that are within. I think if I change that in the axis settings to axis position in the style settings to below, now you see how when I drag around the orange, it's drawn above the axis line. So it's a handy thing to recognize if you have things that you want to go below. By default, the axis line is drawn above everything that you see within your graph. So again, that's within the style settings. You'll see where it says axis line and set axis position to below. But anyway, what you'll see here is that how the orange itself, until that actual orange is on top of that line, the line is not being obscured. So if I am going to download an image, here we go. So now you see this image that I just downloaded. This has 3 different apples in it, and it's downloading in preview. So when you open an image into DataGraph, you'll see that this image has a white background associated with all of these apples. So if I take this image and I can just click here, I think I should be able to do this. No, it's, or is it the command? Sorry, sometimes when I do these, yeah, here we go. So if I take this, I should be able to drag it and drop it right within DataGraph. There we go. Okay, I will do this again just to make sure that this is clear. So I'll make a new graph and I'll show you. If you go to just the left of the name and click, so there we go. I guess I have to hover just a little bit over the name itself. I can click and drag and drop within DataGraph, and that automatically adds it into my DataGraph file as an image. But what you'll see is how the edge of the apples is overlapping the axis range with that white section. So what I want to show you here is how, if I take in preview, you click on this little icon here, hopefully you can see that, where it looks like a little pencil. And then there's a, there we go. You click on this little, it's called Instant Alpha. And when you click on that, then when you click and drag, it will start to highlight sections of the, and maybe this image isn't perfect because it's also taking some of the apple itself. But as I click and drag, it shows all of these, the part that's being selected, that's the same color, gets highlighted. And when you let go of the mouse, you'll see a dashed line around the apples. And if I hit the delete key, it tells me convert this document to a PNG because it's a JPEG. Only a PNG file can have an alpha channel. Actually, I think there are JPEGs that have alpha channels now, but in any case, we'll just, for preview sake, say convert. So we do still have this shadow here, but that's fine. So now that I've converted this and taken away those edges, if I now take this file, hover over to the left of the name, click and drag and drop this into DataGraph, and it creates a graphic command with that image. Let me scale this new one down. Then you can see by comparison, the new one now doesn't have those borders that are overlapping, whereas when I downloaded it by default, it did. Anyway, maybe this took a little longer to show you this than I intended, but really this is a technique that I use a lot to bring files into DataGraph and to remove those alpha channels. So, oops, it's not the one I want to delete this one, so that the images look nice when they're brought in and they won't overlap the other parts of my graph. And what else I want to say about this? I think that's about it. So anyway, so that's one of the techniques that I use a lot with this. The other thing that I do is I often will use these images to then define the colors that I'm going to have in my graphics. And I use the color dropper to do that. So for example, here, let me go to the images that I have brought in here. These are ones where, again, they have transparency. If I move it around, you can see it's not gonna cover. It's just the apple. And what I've done is I've created a color scheme within this graph that matches the apple and the orange that you see here. Here was more my final version, where the way that I put the labels so that they didn't overlap each other. But to do that, there's a couple of tricks to know. First of all, in DataGraph, you have a color menu that you'll see whenever you create a a command that has, some option for defining color. And as you probably know, there's a lot of options for defining. You can, everywhere within the program, you can define what color you see. So here I have two colors, this red from the apple and this orange from the orange, that I have defined, and you'll see them actually in my color menu. So by default, if I create a brand new DataGraph file, then the colors that you'll see within the color menu are these default colors that we set up. And you can go into the style settings and see that the color menu itself is defined within these tiles. So what I often do, we'll just delete this one, is that I will go in and use the color dropper to define the colors that I'm going to keep within my color menu, and then I use that color menu throughout. So for any of you who aren't as familiar with the program and haven't really utilized the color menu yet, the color menu is set up so the tiles are defined or organized, I should say, in terms of line colors and fill colors, but you can use these colors everywhere in your graph. It's really a way that we've set up to try and organize them. But the fact is, you can use the line colors for text. You can use them wherever you want. So here, what I did was and I'll do it with this tile. So if you click on one of these tiles, it will bring up the Mac OS color picker. And there's a little dropper that's here within the color picker itself that when you click on, it brings up this little window that you can hover anywhere throughout your file. And for example, here, if I want to, again, pick my orange color that I'm going to use, and I want it to kind of match my image, I can just click on this, and then it changed the color that's in my color tile based on where I clicked. Oftentimes I'll find sometimes maybe the color that gets chosen is not exactly what I want. So then you can still go into the color wheel and either darken or lighten the color a bit. But now that I've set that color in the color menu, it's available to me throughout. So here, for example, I set both my line color to this orange, but I also set the color for this text label as orange. So this is a text label that that I created. Notice one thing that's handy is that when you click on various elements within your graph, it will bring you to that command that's listed above. So here I click on the apples, it brings me to the text label I added for apples. Click on oranges, it brings me to the text label for oranges. And you'll notice again, the color here, I've set the color for this text label to be line color 2. So it will match the color that you see there. And again, I use that technique throughout a lot of these graphs. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is I want to maybe that's hopefully will inspire you a little bit in terms of creating some graphics within the program. What I want to do is to show you a little bit more about this, starting with this specific visualization on the Icelandic data. So let me open this up. And let's see, a couple of questions, and I'm happy to answer. I feel like I've been a little chatty this morning with this. I didn't necessarily think it would take me that long to show that, but I still think it's cool. Oh, so there's a comment. This is actually useful for everyone. So JPEG 2000, this is a different image format, supports alpha channel transparency. And as thank you for reminding me this, DataGraph can also import JPEG 2000. PSD, PNG, and TIFF files also support alpha channels. There's a comment for those of us who are color impaired. Is it possible for the description to be line color red instead of line color 1? And the problem with that is that you can change the colors within the menu at any time. So if I go to the colors that are in the color menu here in this file, in fact, there's a number of presets that we have at the right-hand side that are a way to change either the set of line colors or the set of fill colors. And to over here, the line colors is again, what's called the fill colors. So if I click on this preset menu, then you can click one of these sets of colors. And because I'm using some of those colors here, it did change the colors in my graphic, maybe not that dramatically. But I guess we have to think about how to do that, because really you can change these around. In fact, you can click and drag these color tiles. So if you wanted yellow to be at red, or red, I'm just changing them all to yellow. So the color tiles themselves, you can click and drag around. What I wonder is if there's a way to maybe actually show the RGB, and if that, and this is the red, green, blue channel that's associated with that color, and if that color has a name, to possibly show that. It's a great suggestion to think about, and I appreciate that. So I have to think about how we could possibly do that, because again, you can change these at any time. Okay, so what you have here is kind of the process by which I came up with this final graphic where I tested this out. Now, first of all, the data where this comes from is from Wikipedia, and in fact, I can let's see, or maybe I have what I should have done is put the link here, and sure enough, I did. That's great. Okay, so I have a link here, and I can also send this link on the chat for anyone who wants to kind of follow along and do this themselves. So first of all, getting data into DataGraph from the web. This doesn't always work perfectly, but for this particular data set, I just copied from this table that was created here in Wikipedia. And so did Command C, and then, and I'll just show this to you in a new file, what this looks like, and then Command V. And that's not exactly the way that we want it, but you can see what happened. DataGraph by default did assume that the first line here was the title. And in this case, I don't want that to be the title. So one thing to realize when you're pasting data in, if that happens to you, let me do Command Z to undo, then because there's a lot of logic that we have to try and pick the titles appropriately, but it doesn't always work. And in cases when the default logic isn't working for you, instead of doing Command V, you can do Shift Command V. And what that does is it brings up this paste special interface that we have. Paste special does, basically what it does is it gives you a preview of what the paste is going to look like, based on what it trying to determine where the different columns are. And you notice there is an option to transpose the data here if you wanted to. There's a separator, either tab or comma, and this is picking up that there's a tab separator between this data. And there's some other options here about how you handle commas, and in terms of removing those from numbers. But what it also does is it doesn't automatically assume the column header. So I can check or uncheck this button. And for this particular data, I would leave that unchecked and say paste. And now I bring in this data where here I have the location, and the numeric column is now, it's still not quite right because it has it set to, it has these what is the word I'm looking for? The bracket and a reference next to them. So just to show you, how you can deal with that, there's a couple of different ways. The first thing here, there's another thing that I find handy for bringing data in is to use the command find and replace. So I'm not going to want these commas in here, first of all, because when a number is saved within the program, you're going to want to strip the commas out. There are actually in the paste special, if this number didn't also have the reference in there, I could strip the comma out. But for this, what I'm going to do first is just do data, find and replace. I can also do this with Shift Command R, brings up the find and replace. And this also has an interface that will show you what's going to happen when you change things around. So here, for example, I'm going to find where all the commas are, and I'm going to replace them with nothing. And it shows me exactly what this data is going to look like after I commit to this change. So I'll go ahead and say change. It's removed my comma. Another thing that I can do here is actually change the brackets themselves into a comma, because I can then say that this is comma separated data. So I'm going to do another find and replace. I'm going to change my bracket into a comma. Oh, actually not that, not the end bracket, the beginning bracket. We'll go ahead and do that. And then if I can do a copy on this and use the paste special one more time, and it will separate this into two different columns. So anyway, a couple of steps there to get the data from the Wikipedia format into the format that we need here, but it's all sort of an automated process that you can, not automated, semi-automated, and you get that preview to show you what's happening. So good hopefully good tips to know for bringing data in. So here's my totals, and I'm going to convert this to a number column. So I can right click on the header to convert to a number column, and then I have all my data. So that's the same data that you see here, except for the fact that, oh, I guess maybe I didn't, looks like I'm missing, oh, did I not copy everything in? Oh, that's right. Okay, yeah. So there were two. This was a few days ago that I did this. I also brought in the data from Iceland, and I brought in the data from other countries combined. So to do that, you can right click on a row, and I then select add row 1, add this to all columns. And then I just copy and pasted the data for Iceland into there. One handy thing to realize is that if you if you right click or command click, I guess is the appropriate term, over a cell, I get a copy option. So you don't have to highlight everything that's in a cell and then click copy. You can just right click over the cell and it will say copy Iceland. Actually, I did this from the internet, but I can do the same thing here, right click over that number, do copy. And now it just wants me to check what column did you want to put this in? And I'm putting it into the total. And I could do the same thing for this last row here. Oops, put it in the wrong spot. Oh, it doesn't like that because I am copying some computed values. So again, I kind of have this tendency to always want to double click more than I maybe need to. But anyway, so I can copy these and paste them in, and you can get those numbers again from the Wikipedia page. So now I have this data the same way that you see here. And what I did the first time that I wanted to do this is I actually thought that I would do a donut type of a graph. So let me show you what I mean by that and why I actually kind of rejected that idea in the end. So let's go ahead and just look at this data that I have here that I brought in. And the first of all, this is an option that's within the pie command itself. So this is a type of or kind of a derivative of a pie chart. Interestingly, for those of you who are longtime users, you may remember this. We, for a long time, did not even have a pie chart option in DataGraph, and even had kind of a statement in our manual that said, we don't have them because we think they're maybe a little overused and not always useful. But we relented, and I mean, pie charts do have some utility to them. And particularly, I think it's interesting, this use of the donut chart, because you can show a lot of data and show interesting graphics with those. So anyway, let me show you first, how do you even make a pie chart here for comparing data? The pie chart, it has a shortcut that's in the toolbar, and it is one of these, it's a command that it's actually, we have commands that draw data and commands that process data. The pie chart does a little bit of both. So if I click this one column and click pie, then it shows me my pie chart that I have here for all this data. And what a pie chart does, actually, maybe it would be instructive for me to, I'll just add a number column and type in maybe a simpler example first. So I add my pie chart. And so what the pie chart does is it will calculate the percentage of each of the entries that you have within your pie chart. And this is something that you can extract. So if I click my gear menu on my pie chart and then say extract as column, then I can get a column that has the computed percentages that have to be computed in order to draw this. And I can also display those percentages. So if I want to display the percent, I can go ahead and do that. And what you'll notice is that these pie charts will always add up to 100. So if you click on this column, click the percentages column and hold down the space bar, just click the space bar, that gives you the quick view or quick graph of the data. And it shows you the sum. I didn't mean to move this around, but here's this, the sum is in the summary table, and the value there is 100. So there's a kind of an algorithm or some logic that's used to make sure that your pie chart will always add up to 100. Anyway, so what I realized when I first started this is, so I did my pie chart, and then to do the donut version, notice that on the pie command, you have an option for size, both the entire radius of the pie chart, and then if I hover over here, the size of the center. As I change this center, then the radius of the pie slice stays the same, but that's where I start to form this, this donut. So I can make this much bigger. If I want it to be narrow, I could also just type in what I want the donut to be. I can type into any of these. But once I created this with the Icelandic data, it just felt like once let me say what the name is of these, so I can set the location for the names. And you can see how these names are really covered up. One thing that the pie chart doesn't do yet is a lot of formatting in terms of moving around where the labels are. It's something we've thought about adding, so it would again sort of show lines and have the labels further away. But in any case, this wasn't seem to working. And you can, one thing that does sometimes work is you can say start at and then change the rotation. And if you have some labels that are really close together, sometimes that at a different angle, that will help. But for this data, it just wasn't working. So the next thing that I thought about in terms of comparing, again, how many people are in Iceland versus other parts of the world, if I go back to, let's see, the file that I have here, is the other thing I tried to do was a stacked bar. oops, which is another technique that can be, oh, sorry, what I'm trying to do here, I'm trying to just make this bigger, which is a technique that can be really useful for displaying comparisons like this. And the way that I'm doing this right now is actually using a pivot command to create this stacked bar where I also have a color scheme associated with it. So the pivot command, if you haven't used it before, pivot commands can do all sorts of really cool things. And if I, let me just make a graph right here. So the pivoting here is basically really just taking this column of data. Oops, I keep hitting the zoom bar, have that go away. Click on the pivot, and then it's going to show me initially just a count of the data that I have here. I can go to this one. Now, what I'm really doing is I'm separating this by regions, and I actually want the value as my amount. So let me go back here and select the value. Yeah, there we go. So the value will show me how I'm scaling the bars. I'm going to scale them by, or I'm going to show my different regions. And I want to, let's see, I can also sort these within my pivot command. And what I guess what I did here is I stacked them on the y-axis. So that's another option. You change the type to stacked. Oh, and then change it by column. Anyway, I know this is a number of steps and I'm going sort of fast. So, but basically, you know, I can kind of play with this. And this is what I did when I first was looking at this data. And when I made this stacked bar, what I found was, again, that some of these numbers were just so small, it didn't seem like it was working right. So what I tried was using a magnify command. And if you go under the command menu, there's add magnification. Actually, this might be in the default toolbar. I may have removed this. So what I did was I took this and I thought, well, maybe in the bars that are narrow, I can go ahead and just magnify that section of my bar graph. And this is all very interactive to do this, to show the values for the countries where the amounts are very small. And you can see, you know, here's the one that I created here. And it's sort of interesting, but I don't know. Again, I just felt like this wasn't quite working right. It was maybe a little too cute. And in the end, what I decided was that it seemed better to just show these as bar graphs. And again, this is using the pivot command, and I have the regions as the rows and the value as the amount of people. One thing that's handy with the pivot command is that when you're, you know, it's called the pivot command because you can use it for data pivoting, where you're using different categories to do different statistics on the data or count or sum. But if you are ever, or what I find I do all the time with the pivot command, if I'm forgetting, okay, what are my rows, what are my columns, is just to expand it out, and it will show you a view of, you know, a virtual table that's really how the data is being processed. So here, for example, you know, I can just open this up and I can see, you know, how this data is being sorted, and that's what's controlling these pie charts here. Let's see, a comment on label call out optimization functionality would be great. I'm not sure what you mean by label call out in terms of, maybe you can explain that comment a little bit more. I mean, if you, in terms of adding labels, we certainly can do that. But, and this can all be, you can sort these as well. Now here I'm using the data as it's sorted within the table, but but showing these bars. So anyway, let me keep going so I have some time to get through more of this. So this is the next version that I did. So I guess what I wanted to just show you is how, with DataGraph, because you can create some of these things so quickly, I pretty quickly realized this wasn't working. Then I tried this and thought, no, that's not working. Then I did this and I thought, well, actually this kind of shows it better than the other graphs. And I was able to bring in an image of a flag. And here I coordinated the colors like we talked about. So I made the color of the font and the color of both the pen here and the color of the font were both set to the blue color from the Icelandic flag. Then I thought, well, it actually looked sort of nice having the background be blue. And that's something that you can set within the canvas settings. Actually, let me go no, I want to show you making the waterfall. So I won't switch this around. Anyway, in the canvas settings, I can set the background color. Then I made the font white. So that looked sort of nice. But I still felt like there was something slightly lacking with this graph. And it wasn't until I slept on it that I realized, well, what's missing is I'm still not doing the comparison of the part to the whole, which was kind of the point of this exercise. And that's when I kind of thought, well, all right, well, so what I need is to have a bar that represents the total number, which is what you see here, and then have these bars underneath that would be this waterfall type of a chart. And the way that we do this in DataGraph is to do some calculations of where we want each of these bars to begin and end. So what I can do here, let me click on this column. I'm going to double click so it will open up my column list. So what I did here is a couple of different things. This is showing me again the amount for each country, and I needed to have the total to place in a bar. So let me go to my one that's blank so that this can maybe be a little bit easier to show you. So here I have my column that has everything. And to get a sum of this, you can just right click on the column and it will have an option here for number from column, and you can pick from any of these statistics. Here I wanted a sum, and then that creates for me a variable down here at the left that is my total. And what I did within my drawing canvas is I actually just made a single bar single line, sorry, that represented that total. And in fact, I did it just using a lines command. So I'll put a point here with the points command just to give me an axis range. But then if I add a lines command, so that's again up in the menu, then I can have a Y line, for example. And if you have ever used these before, you can just you can get the data from a table, but you can also just type in, where do you want a line to be drawn? So I can define, where I want the line to be drawn. And then one of the options is to say, how long do you want the line to be? So here I can change the extent. Instead of being all the way across, I can specify the lower and upper value. And here I would then say the lower value is just going to be 0, and the upper value is going to be the variable total. So now I have a bar that I can, I'm not even using a bar command, I'm just using this variable to create the look of a bar that I'll then also add in my other graphs to. So if I go to my file here, you'll see how I have these calculations for start and end, and this is using column property in order to calculate the where each of these bars has to start. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm using what's called the bar command. This is a command that's under the command menu. I sometimes also even put this I don't have it in my toolbar right now, but I use it all the time. So if you've never customized the toolbar, you can right click here on the toolbar, click customize, and then drag this icon in is one approach. And then you'll have the bar command handy. The difference between the bar and the bars is that in addition to one letter, the bar command I sort of think of as like a bar plot. It allows you to place the bars exactly where you want them. It also allows you to define the beginning and the end of the bar. So it has a lot of flexibility. I can also add color schemes to the bars. So if so what I'm going to need here is not just, let's see, if we just did a normal, let me exclude this. If we did a normal bar command with the bars, actually, let me do this one more time. If I clicked the total column, clicked bar, then I get just a very simple bar graph. Let me add a fill into this one just so you can see them a little better. And I want these to be on my y-axis. So this will be a y bars. I'm also going to flip the direction of the y. So I'll put I'll change in my axis settings, the y type to be reversed. So here I have my bars just all located at 0. But again, I want them to be staggered to create this waterfall. So to do that, I can add an expression column, and I'm going to use a column property called the ISUM to get the incremental sum of this column. Oh, here I call the column total. So this would be, actually, maybe that's a little, we'll move it back to amount. It's the total maybe for that country, but not the total overall. So here's the amount. And if I click that .isum, then I get a column that is showing me the incremental sum across this entire data set. And I can change my bars so that they are going to extend from one location to another. So if I take this, take this column, and I'm going to, here we go, open this back up again. If you notice, the first row currently is set to be the amount of the first value, but I need my first starting value to be at 0. So the approach here is to take the incremental sum, and then I can just subtract, I have to type this correctly, subtract the amount, what am I doing here? Amount column. Oh, I mistyped. Oh, I see what I did. I mistyped the word amount in the first place. There we go. So now that's working. Okay, so now my first row, this is going to be my start value. So my first bar will be start at 0, and then I need to calculate where it's going to end at. And I can do that in another expression column and just say start plus the amount. And then this actually gives me back the incremental sum. So this will be my end value. And again, I can define this within this bar command, where the end value is where the top of the bar is. So I will now use this to replace the amount itself. Now you see kind of the beginning of the waterfall form, but I want it to start from a particular location. So we'll start we're starting at the start column. So there you have now the waterfall chart where it shows you this waterfall. And obviously there's a lot of other styling that I added into this to do the full comparison, but it is, it's not that many calculations in order to get this. And again, I kind of like it because it shows off the way that this bar command gives you such flexibility. Oh, one other option that's useful to do here is to click within the bar command itself, this option for include bottom. So then you can see that each bar then has a complete outline around it. And yeah, and there's that. Okay, so we did the donut, we did the pie, we did the waterfall, and then you can see here, again, this is a matter of just going kind of back and forth with the formatting and the line style and coming up with some colors that worked. Also, a handy thing that's in the current beta that'll be in our next release is that you can add these outlines to text labels. So if you go into any text label, the background now has an outline option. So I used that on the text, on the text of the title in order to give it this sort of a fancy look. Let me see, a label call as per the label clutter issue. Okay, so that's something, yeah, we'll have to think about. I think you're exactly right. That's what we would need to add in to optimize where those labels are located so that they didn't overlap each other in the pie command. Okay, so the other thing that I wanted to show you is in some of the other examples. And if anyone else has any questions, please go ahead and ask. But I wanted to show you the technique that I'm using for doing these pictograms. Go to here and show you this a little bit. So this is something that I thought this was sort of a fun example. And I grabbed from online again, this is just, if you go to the Wikipedia, I won't do it for this one, but if you go to the Wikipedia page for Ms. Pac-Man, they have a list of each of the different food items that they have in the game and how much what is the score for each of those items, the name and the number of points. And then it also has the Unicode character. So I literally just copy and pasted that table in here, and it pasted in the Unicode. So it pasted in these little images without me even doing anything extra. So the actual technique here is to, in fact, do, it's keeping the way that I have this canvas here. Oh, you know what? One thing I did not show you that is sort of important. Let me make sure that I show this to you. So when you start with, first of all, for all of these files, when I start with them, I have to set the size of the graph. And I have been sticking with the size that Twitter recommends, which if you go to the canvas settings, you type in 1200 by 675, and that is the pixel size that Twitter likes as its default. And can make this a little bit smaller here since that's a good number of pixels. But then when you are exporting, when you export, you'll export it at 72 dots per inch. That's an option that's in the export. So I'll go to export graphic. And you can see here I'm exporting as a PNG, and I have the resolution set to 72. If you wanted it retina scaling, then you would double that. But if you do that and you have the setting set to 1200 by 675, you'll get exactly the right size for the files. And I also have saved this in my own custom color menu, so I have this as an option there. If you recall, you can add and remove items from the color menu. I mean, from the size menu. So the technique that I'm using here is actually to use a points command for each one of these rows of data. So if I hover over any of these commands, it will tell me, what is this? So each one of these is an individual points command. And if I hid any of them, you can see, yep, that controls that one. So I have some data that I set up here where I just made a simple column for each one of these this is actually using an expression column itself. So if I go in here, look at what's in this expression column, this is a column that I'm saying it's a value of 1, and it has 1 row in it. So I'm creating this. So this was a little bit more manual than I typically like to do for things. I could have maybe made these all variables and done something, but I basically said I was going to divide all these by 100 and have that be the scaling factor that I would use to make these all relative to one another. So when I create one of these columns, and then I use the, again, this is looking a little funny because I don't have the same format here. Now, what you can do actually is I can select all the layout settings, come to this thumbnail and paste them in, and then I get the exact same setup. So that's really handy. Let me do that again, just in case you have not seen that before. So I create a new graphic, and it is utilizing some of the settings from my prior graph. Specifically, it's utilizing I think the margins that I have set up here. Oh, no, it's not the margins, it's the font. That's what it is. So I have set a very big font for this and a very big line thickness. But if I want to use the exact same settings as before, I could just copy all these and paste them into my new thumbnail. So that's kind of a handy thing to do. So let me just show you this quick and then see if there's any other questions. So to create this pictogram, I just took one of these, made one of these columns, and then, oops, sorry, clicking too many things here. Click on one of my new ones, click on the column and click a points command. What that does is it will add the point at the location. Again, I have my pen here set to really big, so it might look a little strange. But what I actually want to do is not to set the points as, and I'll add maybe one more here so you can see. I actually can add a bunch of these. So I've made the value of the point that's in the y-axis to be where I wanted each one of those pictograms to go. And then as the label for this, I'm just putting the actual Unicode character in. So these are things that you can copy and paste and place within the label setting so that each point has the same exact label. Because the labels by default are offset by the point size, I can set the offset to 0, 0 if I want them at that exact location. And then I can turn the marker off. So you'll just see the actual images there themselves. So kind of an interesting way to create those. So again, it's just using a points command, but making the Unicode character be the label itself. And you can get the full list of the Unicode characters going under the emoji and symbol menu. And any of these you can add in. So if you go to, let me go to another one of these, and where I haven't added a symbol yet, I'm going to place my cursor here and then click on an emoji, and then that becomes the symbol that we see for that one. So I hope that we're just after noon. I hope that was kind of inspiring or informative or helpful. Let me know if there's if anyone has any questions. I'm trying to think of if there's anything else that I wanted to really go over. I mean, the main thing was the different types of bars, the waterfall charts, how you do the donuts. And one thing that's sort of handy that I'll show you just while I wait and see if there's any other questions is for doing those donut charts. Say you wanted to have 100 different categories within one of those with smaller slices. I can just create a list of ones, for example, where they're all scaled to the same width. So here's now a lot of ones. and I'll make this into a pie where I then, oops, again, add this. Maybe I'll just type this in so this is a little bit easier actually to do this. So now I have a very, a lot of different slices, and then I could use a color scheme to color each one of these bars. So this is one of the reasons why this pie command actually has some really cool features that you can use with it. So if I had even a random number, say I go from, let's see, I don't know, 1 to, maybe we'll make it less, 1 to 5. I'll also make 100 random numbers, and we'll go ahead and, actually, I don't necessarily have to round them. I can just have this be what I do my color based on, and then change the fill colors in this pie command to come from a column. And then you can say which column you want the color based on. We'll create the color scheme. And now all of my, where I have each of my values has a color that comes from my color scheme. Yeah, absolutely. So a question, can you show how you added the last sad face emoji? Absolutely. So, and actually this is a trick that someone just showed me, because I had been always copying and pasting the whole setting from the emoji map, and that's not necessarily not necessary. So if I go to emoji and symbols, and then I want to place my cursor where I want that emoji to go, and then literally you can just double click on the emoji, and then it will place it right where your cursor is. So anywhere within DataGraph, you can do this. If you wanted, like you say, a text label that has a smiley face in it, then I added this text label here. Actually, I will just anchor it into the upper right, move it around a little bit. But if instead of text, I want one of these emojis, I have my cursor there, I can click on the smiley face and it places it right within the emoji. And the size of them will scale with the size of the font itself. So when I grow my font here, it's already pretty big, but if I make it even bigger, then my emojis will also scale. And also the, there's a built-in scaling that all of the labels and text boxes have, where if you want to just scale something up a little bit more than the other fonts, you can do that. That will also work with the emojis. So any of the characters that you see here are available to you, which is sort of cool. Now you also have, in addition, for more technical purposes, you have the mathematical symbols and other, pictographs, for example. So, one thing we don't have in DataGraph that I know we have had people requesting, that the points command, for example, had the ability for you to add your own image. We have not added that yet, but you do have, you have all of the, if we go to the points command, you can look at all the different marker types that we have. We have a good bit of marker types there. But if there's anything you're missing, you can go to the character map, and hopefully that gives you enough options for what you can put within the graph. So anyway, so you're welcome. Let's see. So today, we talked about some of these graph types that, again, are more for comparing different sets of data, making data comparisons of different types. When we do the next webinar, I'm going to talk more about and show you examples that are maybe a little bit more sophisticated. For example, there's one that I've been doing, that I've started, that I can just let's see, show you. Whoops. I'm trying to show you. Where is this file? Let's see. Of course, it moved all my all my files around. Let me see if I can get this, and then we'll go ahead and wish everyone a good weekend. So the data that I'm pulling for this one is data on butterfly migration patterns. So the next set of challenges within the 30-day challenge are to make graphs that represent different distributions. So I grabbed data on a project that is somewhat of a, I guess you'd call it sort of a citizen science crowdsourced project where there's a website that you can go to, and anytime that you, or when you have a sighting of a monarch butterfly, you can say where that sighting is, and when that occurs, and how many you saw. And what I have here is the to represent the distribution of monarch butterflies over time. So this would be in February, March, April, May, June, and July. And these this is on the basically when someone reports a first sighting of a butterfly. So this is data that I'm sort of playing with to come up with a representation of that physical distribution of the monarch butterflies over time. So anyway, so thanks everyone, and I hope everyone has a good weekend. And we will, again, I'll be back next week. If you have any specific questions or anything in the meantime, definitely send me an email or post something on the chat. And go ahead and stop sharing for today. And yeah, any other questions? Yeah, reach out and let us know. Great. You're welcome. Yeah, and definitely, you know, if you're inclined, then, you know, make kind of a cool graph and post that on Twitter with me. It'd be fun.